Okay, good morning, everybody. It's now, by my time, it's 7 o'clock, but I know it's 9 o'clock, wherever you are, 7, 8, 9. I want to welcome all of you for this very important session that we are having as part of the FNSSA Stakeholder Week celebration. So this is a session that is really contributing into that process. My name is Kwesi Atakra, and I am your moderator for this session. As you know, this whole thing is on the Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture, FNSSA Partnership. This is a partnership initiative that has been in existence since 2010. And it has generated a lot of activity, research, and innovation, bringing together Europe and Africa in relation to science, technology, and innovation. And through the partnership, there have been quite a number of studies and research undertaken. And as you know, it's very important to learn lessons from this initiative. So we are aiming for this session to give us the opportunity to really see what are the lessons learned, which will be critical for improving how we move into the future. One particular project that I'd like to mention, the LEAP for FNSSA. This stands for the Long-Term EU-AU Partnership for Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture, has been set up to enable the transformation of this existing AU-EU partnership in FNSSA, for its transformation into a bicontinental platform for collaboration. So if you like, moving from a partnership to a platform. And we will, in the course of this session, get to understand what are the dimensions of both ends of the spectrum. A lot of pre-thinking has already gone into this conceptualization of the platform. And in this regard, 6 principles have been identified for the platform. I will not go into these 6 because in the opening presentations, you will get information about these 6 principles. It's just important for you to keep in mind that there are 6 principles. Our session today will consider how to keep the FNSSA partnership fit for purpose and how we can support future collaboration in FNSSA between Europe and Africa. It will also examine 4 of the 6 principles which are proposed for the bicontinental platform. So you recall I just mentioned that there are 6 principles which you will hear of, but 4 of them are particularly focused on in this session. It will also draw on evidence and lessons learned from a number of studies that have been undertaken through the partnership, particularly focusing on 3 recent studies, and we will draw lessons that we can feel needs to be built into the recommendations. And of course, the dialogue with all of you is going to provide a lot of information in there. So let me quickly run you through what our program for this session is going to look like. Essentially, the program consists of 3 segments. The first segment is an introductory segment where we will have some very brief presentations on the background, the context, and the principles that I have just referred to for the platform. So I will introduce the people who would be giving us these introductory messages in a short while. The second segment will then be for us to hear some very brief presentations of findings as they relate to the 4 selected principles of the FNSSA platform, and also cutting across the 3 studies that I hinted at. So this will be given by 4 individuals, and each of them will be particularly addressing one principle, one of the 4 principles. At the end of that session, of course, there will be copious time available for discussion and raising questions and making contributions. We have a number of instruments to help us to do that. One is going to be the chat box. We will keep reminding you. And even at this point, if you have not introduced yourself in the chat box, please get into the chat box, put in your name, your position, and your institution. It's very helpful for us to know who is here. So the chat box will be a very active tool. And I have a colleague, Tim Fry, who will be helping me as a chat box manager. So in the course of presentations, if anything strikes you, please just get into the chat box and put it down. It could be a comment, it could be a question, and we will find space to voice out some of those. The second instrument we'll be using is the Mentimeter, and we've already put the link for the Mentimeter in the chat box. So please get in there and register yourself so that you can be part of the deliberation through the Mentimeter. And then finally, we would run a couple of polls. We'll have 2 polls, one in the beginning and one in the end. And we encourage all of you to be actively participating, because this is a very important part of the whole thing. Finally, we would have this, the third segment is the conclusions. And there we have 3 individuals who will be sharing their thoughts on what they see as the key conclusions coming out of this deliberation. So I want us to, our Mentimeter experts, please start getting our first poll ready. The Mentimeter link has already been given, and it's also on the screen now. So we invite you to get into the Mentimeter, and then our first poll will be shooting up the next few seconds. Tineke, are you ready? Please, let's have the poll. Okay. We already see some results in there even before we start. Okay, please go ahead and let's see you taking your position with regard to how familiar are you with the FNSSA partnership and roadmap. Is this something that is part of your vocabulary and something you are very familiar with? It's important we know from the start where we start. Yeah, we can all see the graph building up very nicely. We'll just give a couple more seconds. Okay, so it looks like that's the result that we have. We have quite a number of people who are quite comfortable. They know what is extremely familiar if you put the extremely familiar and somewhat familiar together, you have quite a large group. But it's also very important, the very last group, those who are not familiar, because this workshop, we hope, will help to bridge that gap. And also those who are weakly familiar. So I'm quite hopeful that we will be able to provide information that will guide us into that process. Okay, so right now we're going to move straight into the first segment of the meeting. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you who our presenters in this introductory session are going to be. Our first presenter is Dr. Hans-Georg Luzier. He is a senior policy officer at the Directorate General Research and Innovation of the European Commission, based in Brussels. He is in charge of Food Systems Africa and co-chairing the EU Food and Nutrition Security and Sustainable Agriculture FNSSA Working Group. So he's a very important personality for us to have in this session. Second, we'll have Marta Iglesias. Marta is a senior policy officer at the European Commission and the policy officer who is directly responsible for the Leap for FNSSA project. Welcome, Marta. And then we have Hambani Masheleni. Hambani is Senior Policy Officer at the Department of Human Resources, Science and Technology at the African Union Commission. So three very powerful individuals in their own right. And I'd like to start by inviting Dr. Hans-Georg Luzier to begin with his opening remarks or his opening address.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you in this second day of the Stakeholder event. And for us, it's really a very good opportunity to connect to all of you who are active in projects which are funded by the FNSSA priority and who are now actually keen to work on your agreed roadmap, agreed descriptions of work in the project and work towards impact. And as we are soon, in the coming days, or let's say 10, 14 days, opening Horizon Europe with the first work program, I think it's a very exciting moment to look at impact, to look at what the monitoring exercises tell us on the projects funded so far. And I would like to pass on to Mash, actually, for the first slides of our presentation. And later on, I and Marta will complement. Mash, are you around?
Thank you very much. Thanks for passing the baton over to me for our joint presentation. I think, Mr. Moderator, you heard my other name I'm very popular with. It's Mash. They mean Hambani Masheleni. And I'm from the African Union Commission. I'm the acting head for science, technology, and innovation in the commission. I will give a brief on our partnership on the first slide, is alluded to by him. I think the most important thing that we're looking at today is the excitement that we had in the EU-Africa partnership, particularly the high-level the high-level policy dialogue on science, technology, and innovation. What is the EU-Africa high-level policy dialogue in science, technology, and innovation? This is a platform that was established by the heads of state and government in 2010 to enable us to embed science, technology, and innovation in the partnership. And what was more important was it became a platform for better common understanding, building trust, ownership, and most importantly was to come out with a set of priorities where we design, joint co-own the programs and monitor the implementation together. And here we are today. The EU-Africa Summit dialogue established the, I'm sure the first slide please, established the expert group, and that expert group was put together to come up with a roadmap that enables us to work together as two continents. And our first priority of that roadmap was on science, technology, and innovation, and ensuring food security, nutrition, and sustainable agriculture. The idea was to have an integrated STI approach, recognizing the importance of cross-cutting nature of innovation, entrepreneurship, research infrastructure, and technical competencies, as well as strengthening our collaboration. And we also wanted to ensure that this partnership looks at the management of water resources so that we could work together. One of the most important platforms we have been using to drive the process has been the high-level policy dialogue, which comprises of senior officials. They made the recommendations for the R&I partnership on food, nutrition, and sustainable agriculture. Then we moved on to come out with R&I progress report in FNSS in 2019. Next slide. So those were the key timelines we have been going together. But what has been very important in this partnership was the word jointly designed, that phrase, owned, co-owned, managed by ourselves and resourced by ourselves. And today we are very glad that we have moved to this level where we are taking stock and monitoring what we are doing within this partnership. It is to enhance the coordination of FNSSA relevant research and innovation policies, programs, as well as funding mechanisms. We want to build on past experiences and create synergies and optimize investment and identify the challenges or the gaps that exist in the cooperation. We also want to see the key features such as operating in a food system approach across the entire value chain, where we bring together various institutions from our continent, Africa and Europe, to link up research to innovation, and we want this to be very inclusive, not leaving any of the key stakeholders behind. So it's an integrated approach which recognizes, like I said, the cross-cutting issue, particularly the need for capacity building. I will pass over the next slide to my colleague. Thank you very much, Hank.
So I'm back. Thank you, Mash, for your introduction with the first slides of our joint presentation. I would like to outline that the, let's say, coherence, the consistency of all the activities of the different instruments which we could mobilize actually in with the partnership is important. So keeping an oversight. And on purpose, we designed a very light oversight by the working group on the R&I partnership on FNSSA. So it's a working group, the FNSSA working group, co-chaired by the African Union Commission and by the European Commission. So co-chairs are Laila Lokosang from the African Union Commission, Monica Idebele, Marta Iglesias, and I. And we have representatives from Egypt, France, Germany, Portugal, South Africa, and Sudan in the working group. The working group has regular meetings every 2 months around, and a very, let's say, important agenda looking at reports, how to, let's say, progress in the partnership, how to take stock of what works well and how to improve. And one of the very important elements is monitoring and evaluation of the FNSSA partnership. It was part of the initial roadmap, and meanwhile, a very sound mechanism of monitoring and evaluation has been put in place. Next slide, please. So the monitoring and evaluation is driven by the FNSSA roadmap. It's also results-based and impact-focused. It includes a hierarchy of objectives, including the SDGs, and it's deliberately lightweight and simple. And it's scalable if the project portfolio, once the project portfolio increases further. I think what is very important that if you are project coordinator, project participant, and you get requests for working with the authors of the monitoring and evaluation exercise, with the monitoring and evaluation team, that you are open to respond and to work with them, because this feedback actually will assure the future of the partnership. So we really need feedback on how the networking works, how young researchers are encouraged in the projects, how first results make their way to public goods and are applied, how, for example, the multi-actor approach takes its roots in all the projects which are designed multi-actor. Multi-actor is always a challenge, bringing different groups of scientists, of food systems and agricultural actors, farmers organizations together. Therefore not easy to implement, but essential actually to that results make a real life impact in the lives of actors in the food system. So my call on you, please be open if you are asked to participate in the monitoring and evaluation exercise. Next slide, and I would pass over to Marta.
Let me see. Okay. Good morning. Thank you, Hans-Jörg. Thank you for introducing me. So I would like just to see a bit of how is the future that we have ahead and how can we, let's say, shape it to our needs. So we are looking into a sustainable platform for collaboration. So as we heard in the beginning today, which I like very much, we have the ambition to move from a partnership to a bicontinental platform. And this platform, we need to see what is the governance mechanism that is needed and how can we go and reach out to key actors to be part of the platform. So the idea is that this bicontinental platform will be European and African institutions, but also stakeholders, networks, and why not investment, private investors and foundations that could be, let's say, committed to work in the field of the food, nutrition, security, and sustainable agriculture. And these future partners will be committed to implement the roadmap that has been designed jointly between Africa and Europe in 2016. So this platform will need to have clear objectives and, as I said before, a flexible governance mechanism that will be allow the platform to be, let's say, also flexible to adapt to emergencies like we have today with the COVID or the locust plague that we are facing in some parts of Africa. So there will be times where a quick response will be needed. If we have in place this platform, coordinated actions will be easier to do and quicker to react. So as we heard in the introduction, we will have 6 principles for the platform. And the first one is the inclusiveness. So as I said, we want to reach out for all these key institutions working in the field of research and innovation, but also stakeholders, and I said the potential foundations and investors. Then we want to have people there committed for the FNSSA platform. And it has to be we have the opportunity to jointly co-design the platform. And those who will be at the beginning will have the responsibility to agree on how this platform is going to be governed. And we will have equal rights to all partners to be in the platform. Next slide, please. Of course, it's a research and innovation platform, but we look into impact. We want to make visibility of the investments and the actions done and have impact. So that's going to be one of the driving, let's say, principles for the platform. It will be, as I said, innovative, but also effective. It will leverage, has a potential for leverage investments, but also it will be the opportunity to connect the existing, let's say, infrastructures and networks, and will help to align these efforts about avoiding duplication of actions and to, as I said, achieve higher impact. It has to be sustainable in time. So we are looking into a long-term platform. So this is very important because we want this to continue to be a success, as this has been so far, this partnership on FNSSA. So it's quite ambitious, but I think the theme and the aim of this future platform is quite ambitious and relevant for the both continents. So with this, I thank you for your participation, and I'm very looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is excellent from all 3 of you. You've really helped us to set the scene for this session. We learned a number of things from the 3 presentations. Particularly, I was pleased to have the emphasis that this actually originated and signed off by heads of states. So it's not something that we're just doing it amongst the scientists and the technical level people. It actually originates from the heads of states agreements in Europe and Africa. Another thing I was very happy to hear is that the FNSSA was selected as the first priority. In other words, food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture was selected as the first priority of the high-level policy dialogue. So that shows the importance of this subject. We've also been told that the working group of the FNSSA is co-chaired by AUC, the African Union Commission, and by EC. And the importance of monitoring and evaluation has been stressed. And we were also led to the fact that there is a roadmap which has been established, and that the roadmap guides the operations of the FNSSA working group. Finally, Marta gave us a hint into the future, basically establishing a sustainable platform for collaboration in the area of FNSSA, bringing Europe and Africa together. So that's really wonderful, and I thank all 3 of you. I want to call on Tim Fry. Tim, is there anything from the chat box, any comment you might wish to make? If anybody has made a point or anything you want to tell us about how the chat box is doing so far?
So no questions or points, but it's nice to see that we've got a range of participants, some from research institutes, others are private actors, and I think we've got at least 1 project that has participated in the baseline. So a nice group of participants.
Excellent, thank you. And I'll use this opportunity to also remind those of you who may not have introduced yourselves on the chat box please do just give us your name, your organization, and your position. It's important. So please, if you haven't done that already, get into the chat box and do it. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, we move to the second segment, the second of our 3 segments. And this is the time when we do the presentation of findings as they relate to the 4 selected principles of the FNSSA platform. And these findings will also cut across the 3 studies that were selected for the analysis. The presentations will be given by 4 individuals. We'll have Jenny van der Meer, who is the Managing International Cooperation Africa within the Wageningen University and Research. Solomon Atilade is a Monitoring and Evaluation Manager with the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. Dr. Florence Nakayiwa is Deputy Executive Secretary, Planning Resources, Mobilization, and Management from Ruforum. And finally, Tim Fry, who is Program Officer with the Association of Commonwealth Universities. Now, all these 4 are members of the Leap for FNSSA project, and it is from that perspective that they share their thoughts. So let me invite the first, Jenny van der Meer, to lead us on to the first principle. Over to you, Jenny.
Yes, thank you, Kwesi. I am trying to start my video. Apologies. Yes, I think you can now all see my screen and hear me.
We can see your screen, but if you can put it in presentation mode, it might be easier.
I thought I had it in presentation mode.
Jenny, we see the speakers slide. So I believe if you go up to display settings, you can change, if you have two screens, for example, you can change that there.
Display settings on top, then you can. Otherwise, we can.
Is it better now?
We're still in the speakers mode. So up on the top, you see display settings, and there you can change your monitor.
I'm sorry, I don't see.
Up on the top of your screen.
Display
You will see
settings.
the display.
Yes.
So, and then you click the.
It doesn't work.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Okay.
Can you live with this presentation mode?
We sure can. We sure can. Let's go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, nothing happens when I push the button. So the previous presenters have already mentioned the 6 principles and emphasized that moving from the FNSSA partnership and developing it into a bicontinental platform, 6 principles are very important to everyone. And what we have done is 3 studies were implemented and that looked at projects that have already been implemented under the FNSSA partnership and looked at these 6 principles. What can we learn from what has been carried out so far? So this particular presentation is a result of a study that looked into 105 projects funded to support the FNSSA partnership. And inclusiveness, of course, is a huge concept. We were able to look into 2 main issues of inclusiveness, the geographical coverage so far, and the involvement of stakeholder groups. As Marta said before, these are very important topics for all of us. Now, looking at the distribution of projects in Europe and Africa, the findings of these 105 projects that were funded show that they involved 45 African and 21 European countries. That's good news. But if you look at the picture here, you will see different colors for each country. And the darker the country, the more projects they have implemented under the partnership. And so basically what we are seeing in Africa, the countries that are most involved are Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, and South Africa. And for Europe, we also see a very uneven spread. France, followed by the Netherlands and Germany, are the most active, whereas Eastern European countries are less or some not at all involved. So this is a first finding. The second finding on inclusiveness, and then looking at the stakeholder involvement of the stakeholder groups, we saw that while around 70% of the projects that were reviewed explicitly mentioned food systems or a value chain approach that would link the research institutions or universities to the other stakeholders in the food system or the value chain. The table, which is on the screen now, shows that if you look at the partners in the project, there's a strong bias towards research institutions and universities. If you add these first two rows, you will see that 65% of all actors involved are composed of research organizations and universities, compared to only 9% of the private sector. The participation of the private sector remains low, despite the fact that there have been programs such as the ERANET co-funded LEAP Agri that allowed private partners also as applicants of projects or to take part in the consortium, that they are still not very interested in being involved in these programs because of the administrative complexity of the funding schemes, and for certain projects where intellectual property is important, they don't see the incentive that their intellectual property will be protected. This is something that is of a concern because LEAP Agri did pay particular attention to this, as the idea was that the uptake of research output and scaling of innovations would be very important, or it would be very important to include particularly the private sector as a partner in these programs. For clarity's sake, private sector also includes pharma organizations. So the conclusion of on the inclusiveness is that this is an important principle, but if we want to make the future platform that we are all building together inclusive, we do need to make a concerted effort to involve all stakeholders when transitioning into that platform. Thank you, Crazy. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That's very good. Let me at this point alert Tim to keep checking to see if there's any point, but let me just, whilst Tim is doing that, highlight a few things that Jenny has indicated. First of all, the study covered over 100 projects, basically trying to figure out how this inclusiveness element is covered. And then we see she reported that about 45 African countries against 21 European countries, but that is not all. You also need to look at what is actually happening in these countries in terms of the actual depth of engagement. And there, the distribution is not very favorable. And not just in the case of Africa, but also in the case of Europe, where you find that Eastern Europe doesn't seem to be actively engaged. Then the very second point that she made, which is very important, is the fact that when we talk about inclusiveness, we have over 65% of institutions engaged in this coming from the research institutions and the universities. So it is becoming an academic club. That's the way it is appearing. And so we need to basically figure out how can we break that bubble and really get into, particularly she mentioned the private sector and said private sector is not even interested because of admin complexity and other intellectual property issues, etc. So those are things that we would need to look at, and I think we'll be looking at it as we move on. Tim, let me hand over to you in case there's any point or.
Thanks, Gracie. So we've got two questions. One surrounding the roadmap, given the response of the Mentimeter, perhaps we need to clarify what the roadmap is a bit better. And then we've also got a second question on how can our expert network based in Zambia be part of LEAP for FNSSA or the FNSSA Partnership and Platform?
Okay, so the first one is about the roadmap. Who would tell us a little bit, about what this roadmap really is? Melissa, would you just off the top of your head give us a little bit of light on what the roadmap entails?
Sure. I think that Mash did a really great job of summarizing the roadmap all together, and I can also share my screen and show you that this is, you can read the roadmap on our Miro board, which we will put the link to in a bit. But here is this Miro board space where we have lots of information on the whole week. For example, you can go over here to download the full program for the week, the participants guide, but also information on the platform, which we're talking about today. And if you scroll out a bit over here on the left side, we are you can download the roadmap, which is found on this green sticky note, as well as the two studies that we're going to be talking about in a little bit more detail today. So this will help you find all of the material that we are talking about. But the roadmap, I think, is very important document between the African Union and the European Union and member states, outlining cooperation in a few crucial areas, and I'm gonna pull them up on my own screen so I don't forget any of them. But there are kind of four main areas for cooperation where it is seen that there would be a benefit from bi-regional cooperation, and especially bi-regional STI cooperation, and that's in sustainable intensification, agriculture and food systems for nutrition, expansion and improvement of agricultural markets and trades, and cross-cutting issues, which include improved coordination between European and African FNSSA research and innovation projects, supporting innovation processes, strengthening collaborative capacities of R&I communities, and social and cultural context of FNSSA production systems. So very briefly and shortly, that is the 4 major areas of the roadmap, and basically it is the document that is helping to guide the cooperation between Europe and Africa in this area.
Thank you very much. This is very helpful, especially also sharing your screen for us to see the resources that are available. If we can get to Myra platform so that we can get the documents that we have been referring to. So that's very helpful. The platform link was shared earlier, but I would encourage that we should share it again in the chat box so that people can have access. The second question was really related to somebody who wanted to find out how can his or her organization participate in the Live for FNSSA. I don't know if Philippe is online. I think I saw his name. Philippe, are you there? Okay.
I don't see him.
Okay, all right. I mean, basically, we would be leaving the particular links for the key people who are helping to manage the LEAP program. There is already a project which is on course, and they have a number of countries that are participating, but I believe there are opportunities to be able to extend that. But let me ask Melissa, since Philippe is not there, let me ask Melissa to also give us a bit more specifics on that. Melissa?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight something that was discussed on day 1 of the Stakeholder Engagement Week, which is the European Commission is launching something called the Africa Initiative, which will be a set of calls for research and innovation, collaborative research and innovation projects that will fund research in the areas that are relevant to the roadmap. So this will be launched rather soon, so in mid-June. And Martha and Hans-Jörg are probably much better able to tell about these calls than I am, but in any case, the call, the whole Africa initiative is aiming to encourage research and innovation collaboration between the 2 researchers in Africa and in Europe. And one of the topics that will be included in this very large initiative is topics related to food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. They are expecting to launch the topics and the calls in mid-June. So more information can be found from the European Commission website when that's launched. And if you also go to the Miro board that we had, or that I just showed, you can find the PowerPoint presentation from that session to download, and also video from the session, so you can learn more if you weren't able to join us on Monday.
Thank you very much, Melissa. This is very, very useful information. And I would encourage that you put something in the chat box with the link to this Africa initiative, because I believe a lot of our colleagues, not only in Africa, but in Africa and Europe, would want to be kept abreast of what is happening in relation to this opportunity so that they can keep themselves linked into that. Can I find out from Tim? Tim, do we have any other point? Or otherwise we'll move to the next. Yes, please.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, we've got a few very good questions. The first 2 I'm going to somewhat amalgamate, and they relate to how can projects overcome some administrative issues to bring it in the private sector, or to actually joining in Africa calls from Horizon Europe or other funders.
Okay, that's a very important question. And you've actually hit the button, because that's one of the issues we are going to be dealing with when we get into the Mentimeter exercise. I'm sure whoever raised the question may also have some ideas. Now, this is the kind of area where we feel a lot of people have different experiences, and some of these experiences have to be put on the platform so that we can all learn and equip ourselves. So instead of trying to provide an answer in that, I just want to say that there will be an opportunity when we get into the Mentimeter exercise for all of us to share our thoughts in relation to this very important area. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest we move to the second presentation that will be addressing the second principle that is selected. So I'd like to call on Solomon Atilade to lead us into that presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kwesi, and thank you for opportunity to share on behalf of the LIFO FNSSA and Task 1.4 some of the work we did to better understand the various activities of the programs and projects towards the achievement of the broader roadmap partnership. I hope you are hearing me.
Yeah, can you share your video also so we can see you?
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. I'll be sharing my screen now. I just want to find out whether you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see the screen. Okay. Can you put it in presentation mode? At the bottom of the screen, you have your, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you again. I just to say that the background for this baseline studies that we did was with the view to better understand how the various programs and projects are contributing towards the objectives of the roadmap, and also building on the partnership model that we hope to achieve. And so in order to be able to do that in the context of the partnership and the roadmap, we develop a theory of change and a particular approach by which we will be able to document this improvement that we are seeing in the activities of the programs and the project. And we focus on three main themes that talks about how do we ensure that we're able to document the research and innovation that is being developed, and how are they being uptake by stakeholders, and how involved are various stakeholders in achieving that. We also went to begin to look at, the idea behind structures and governance mechanisms that are in place to be able to ensure that that happens across projects and across programs. And then we also looked at, the capacity that are inherent within programs and the projects to be able to drive this research and innovation in order to be able to achieve the long-term goal. Ultimately, the goal of the partnership focuses on achieving a lot of the SDGs. That speaks to nutrition, that speaks to reduction in poverty, that speaks to issues that relates to partnerships, trades, and market as well. How there are flows within income, from EU to AU, bicontinental inflow of resources. So that is the premise behind the study. And then we were able to collect data from 52 projects within the partnerships. We requested 52 projects to provide data ranging from projects that are run on the Africa research grants, those by the LEAP Agri groups and the Horizon 2020 and DevCo projects. So we were able to get back feedback from 20 of those projects. And then beyond just the quantitative approach to collecting this data, we also interviewed 9 projects across the spectrum of these programs that I mentioned to discuss and collect qualitative information from them. And on the basis of that, we are making this following conclusion that tends to support the need for us to work and design our programs or implement our activities in a co and joint orientation. So what we really found out in that study was that building upon active partnership can actually derive from the co-design thoughts that was fundamental based on some of the discussion we had, Heinz and colleagues from AU talked about, really is very, very critical, and that has helped to build active partnerships. What we really observed was that development of projects and partnership often aligns with the partnership goals and then individual organizational agendas. And we also observe that these partnerships aligns also towards achieving the broader goal of the whole partnership. And so what we are saying is that if we have noticed that and continuously ensuring that co-designing and improvement in project co-designing will actually enhance and promote active partnerships that we hope to see. We also observe that developed and enhanced by network operatives. Operation happen at different levels, and because that happens, we were able to draw from different networks that makes possible the inclusion of different partners, and then that by enhancing these networks, we are able to see needs and other research areas that are necessary to achieve the objective of the roadmap possible. We also have seen that in order to be able to give credence to the need for co-designing of programs, or which was inherent there before, we saw the role of multi-sectoral groups, in ensuring that happened. And what we saw in the study was that with the inclusion of this multi-sectoral group, we include farmers in the designing of the project across the various implementation areas. We saw that the inclusion of it was successful in improving the uptake of the various novel and research methodologies and technologies and services that each of the various programs and projects were planning to carry out. So joint involvement of multi-sectorial was one key thing that we saw that was very useful, and I think it's one of the things that will enhance the co-design principles that this platform seeks to establish. The other thing we also saw was that the evidence that because of the strong co-designing features, that emanate from strong project partnership and governance, it's also evident that because of the structures and the partnership and the governance system that was in place, we saw success in working together in achieving results. So projects with strong co-design features, this ability to assess partnership capacities and subsequently implement capacity strengthening measures earlier. And so what we also saw was that as we project that are based on different approaches before, some capacity initiative programs that are inherent in the development of some of these projects before was useful, was leveraged on, and that makes implementation and success in the result that we saw. And that some projects with co-design features had more buy-in and active partnership. So where that element of collaborative efforts working in networks among the project led to better results as we saw. Some of the other lessons that we learned and that was the fact that more of the projects were led by the European partners, colleagues, institutions, and that we are seeing fewer women in leadership positions. And if we're talking about this co-design as one of the principles, the need for us to enhance and see the inclusion of women and within the research domain in position of leadership will be very critical for us to move forward. And then also shift, encourage, like you saw in the presentation by inclusion from Jane, the need for us to increase the involvement of African Union partners to be more involved in this, to be able to balance the geography and participation of partners and projects in the partnership. Then the other thing that we also can learn from that could be a bottleneck or like a block to co-designing is the issue of the financial and the administrative burdens. That the issue of administrative process, for example, there are issues around some partners are supposed to contribute some funding at some point, and when those funds are not available, or there's administrative processes that need to be established that are not quickly put in place, can be a challenge to co-designing of projects, and perhaps learning from that might be useful going forward. The other thing that we learned is that the projects are coming from different capabilities in terms of their involvement in various EU programs before, because of the very many experiences that some of these projects institution comes with because of their involvement in some EU program before. It makes them to even be able to support and run programs much more than those who do have previous funding support from or experience from EU programs before now, and that participation influenced by were also influenced by the kind of work that some of these partners had in previous time done. And so the idea is that ensuring that we're able to leverage these various capacities and these various experiences working jointly might continue to promote co-designing of projects. And so these are some of the few things we learn, but I would like to acknowledge some of our colleagues in University of Greenwich, Adrian Martin and Sarah, and somebody from IT who was also part of the process of collecting this and the analysis and the report. Thank you. I would like to stop here.
Thank you so much, Solomon. This is very helpful, giving us some lessons learned from the co-design dimension into the various projects that you studied, starting with 52, but then getting responses from 20. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you have pulled out a number of vital issues, emphasizing the importance of building upon actual partnerships. So we don't always start from scratch, you know, really getting to know active partnerships. But then these partnerships should be such that they align towards the goal that we are addressing, and essentially towards the SDGs, you know, which sort of links into that. And when we talk about partnerships, it's not only in terms of particular organizations, but also networks. You know, you mentioned the importance of linking on networks that are operating at different levels and see how we can build upon that. But one point I particularly like is your emphasis on multi-stakeholder groups, you know, being able to. But the question I ask is, did you come up with identifying the mechanisms that are used by these different projects in trying to you know, get into multi-stakeholder engagement? It will be interesting to have your comment on that, whether you got some of these mechanisms, because at the end of the day, it's all about mechanisms. How are they actually getting these engagements? And you also mentioned the importance of co-design leading to strong project partnerships. It's really about ownership, you know, from what I hear you speak. It's about ownership. So if people have been involved in designing, there is much more tendency for them to see themselves as, you know, part of this whole program. But there are downsides in terms of time to engage, downsides in terms of funding available, and things like that. So those are all very important elements that you have. And then finally, you highlighted the fact that even though we're talking about co-design, we can also see the inclusiveness element addressed. And this sort of ties in with what we heard from Jenny. In this particular instance, we see that when it comes to project leadership, it's mainly the Europe institutions, much more. So we need to find a way of increasing the African leadership. And another gap you highlighted is women leadership in a number of these project initiatives. So anyway, let me just stop here. And first of all, let me ask Solomon, do you want to make a quick, if you did not look at the mechanisms, that's fine, but if you can make a comment on the examples of the mechanisms that these projects use.
Yeah, like you said, what we requested from the partners was to just reflect on some of the stakeholder networks formations that they are working with. We didn't really dig down to asking some of those, but we are in our request when trying to explain to them what we are looking for when we talk about this multi-sectoral partnership. We are talking about some dialogue, some activities that stakeholders, platforms that were established within their project mechanisms to be able to ensure they drive this inclusion of this of this other multi-sectoral groups. Those are some of the things that we try to explain with the view to say, if you understand, this is the kind of question we're asking you to respond to. But in terms of detail, we might be taking that going forward in some of the things that we'll do next.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to put on the table this tool of innovation platforms. I'm sure a number of people in this session would be familiar with the innovation platform approach, where you bring all these stakeholders, focus on a particular issue to basically meet But once again, this has to be part of the program development. So it's not something that you just pluck out of the sky. It's got to be part of the program development. It's got to be budgeted for to be able to get multi-stakeholder engagement. It doesn't come free. So that's an issue that I believe as we move forward, part of the lessons learned in moving it. Okay, I'd like to call my friend Tim again to see if there's anything from the chat box that he might want to alert us to.
Thanks, Gracie. Yeah, we've got a few questions. Some are somewhat related to what we've just been discussing about how we can increase co-design even whilst being only able to access each other via Zoom, and how we can kind of establish platforms that support knowledge transfer and kind of common effective working mechanisms whilst being affected by COVID.
Very important point. So how can we take advantage of the new skills and the new tools that we currently have to enhance co-design? And I think that's a point that has to be put on there. Even if we don't have the answer, it's a point that is being made that we need to explore how we can make use of the new facilities and technologies available as part of co-design efforts.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, maybe I just wanted to make some statement here. What we found out was some of the innovative approach, because this study we did was done during the COVID period also. There was some restriction of partners at EU coming to Africa to get some few things done. But what was evident in the study we found out was that there were existing capacity initiatives that had already been done by some of these partners who would have built capacity of some of the African partners, to the extent that the disruption that came through this COVID was not a major challenge, because the capacity that are inherent within the Africans or the other region built earlier will suffice to drive some of the efforts that need to be done in order to get the activities done. So they were leveraging on some of the experience or some of the work that was done before that made some of those activities go on without some of them not being able to come to get that activity done. I think that was one thing that we learned that was very, very critical.
Okay, thank you, Solomon. So please let's take note of this point. How can we use technology to enhance our co-design elements in the projects that we are running? Okay, Tim, do you have any other point, or do we move on?
I think we're fine to move on now.
Okay, very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think this has been exciting, getting to know all these lessons learned from what we've heard from Solomon. So we're moving to the third presentation, which will be given by Florence. So Florence, if you are there, please take the floor and show your screen and also your video.
Okay, thank you very much, Kwesi. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to be here and to hear all those. Let me share my screen.
Excellent, we see your screen.
Okay, if you see my screen, that's good. So I'm going to be sharing about one of the principles for the platform, which is research and innovations for impact. So a lot of the research that we do, how impactful would it be? How fit will it be for purpose? Or will it be research just for the sake of research? So this is the principle that is guiding this discussion that I'm putting forward. And it comes from a study that was taken of 105 projects that are already ongoing in Africa and Europe, and out of the 308 projects in the LEAP for FNSSA database. And what did we find? Because we know that if you don't know where you are or where you have been, it will be quite difficult for you to go forward. So this principle is focusing on research and innovation activities with a vision for impact. What did the study find out? The study established, I don't know whether you see this well.
Florence, can you, at the bottom of your screen, you can go into full screen mode.
I know, but I'm not seeing the full screen.
On the right one. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I hadn't seen it. I was still looking for it. This study established what type of research and innovation that we have, the percentage of projects that among the 105 that were assessed. Development impact had 62.5%, applied research had 33.3%, and then institutional capacity building had 22.9%, while fundamental research projects, which is the basic research, was at 11.4%, and strengthening partnership and alignment at 7.6%. This was showing that of all the projects that we have right now in the system, development and innovation did play a significant role. And that also implied that even for the budget distribution for those projects that are supported by the different programs, including LEAP Agri, including DESIRA, and other Horizon 2020 aspects, and also the African Union research grants. This is the type of projects that we have, and this is the focus of the projects that we have. However, it was established, as I mentioned earlier, that 62% of the funds had been used to fund development and innovation-oriented projects, and then 31% of the projects that were assessed do fall into categories. You find that the project does development, but is also part of applied research, or is development and is also individual capacity development. So we do have projects that fall across two categories, which means that we cannot rule out, if we are talking about impact, how the projects cross the different boundaries of the focus that we have. Still, as far as those projects are concerned, in the study, we did establish that the study did establish that 68% of the projects make reference to technology uptake and scale up in the long run. But we also established, the study established that 80% of the projects are still ongoing, and therefore we would not know at this point in time to what extent these will effectively contribute towards the innovation process. And how they would stimulate this local innovation. We also, the study also established that appropriation of new technologies, services, and products will require additional resources, because these projects are ongoing right now and they have specific targets and processes. But for us to continue appropriation of these new technologies to promote impacts, then there would be need for additional resources. But also this study, having assessed the study, we saw that there is need to get more insight into the technical, social, institutional, and financial innovations adopted as a result of the R&I projects. These are offshoots that came out of the projects that have been implemented, but we need to do studies or a deliberate effort to establish these other aspects of impact that come as a result of the research projects that have been implemented both within Europe and Africa under this FNSSA partnership. And the platform therefore will have to look at these going forward. Oh, thank you very much. That is what this was all about. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Florence. Taking us through the research and innovation and links to development and impact. I think I sense a little bit of, how do I put it? A difficulty in linking what you have just said with regard to the percentage to fund development and innovation-oriented work, which is actually over 60%. And I find it difficult to reconcile that with the point Jenny made, that 65% of the funding was going to research institutions and universities. And we know when we talk about development and impact on the ground, it's not only accomplished through this research and universities. There has to be a partnership that links with private sector, partnership that links with development organizations on the ground, civil society groups on the ground. So this whole element of linking with intermediation partners. So if we are weak on that side, I find it difficult to see how 62% of the funding can be said to be supporting development and innovation oriented work. Flores, I know this is not an easy question to answer, but you may want to take the opportunity to reflect your thinking a little bit. Am I getting something wrong here?
Yes, thank you very much, Kwesi. The issue is that this study looked at 105 projects that are ongoing. And if you look at the objectives and the implementation of these projects, what you pick from these projects demonstrates development. So that's where this comes from. It is in terms of objectives, in terms of implementation, a development-oriented project as opposed to, say, a basic research project. That's where the big percentages come from. I hope that's a response to what you're asking. Yes.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you very much for. Tim, do we have anything from the chat box that you might want to highlight?
I think we've got a question from earlier that Jenny has somewhat answered about how we can include NGOs and INGOs into the FNSSA partnership and platform. And obviously they can build upon impact that is built by research innovation activities.
Okay, can somebody, making use of the raise hand button, if anybody wants to comment specifically on this issue, because we're talking about development orientation and linking with NGOs and field groups on the ground, farmer associations, etc. So the question that has been raised, which Tim has just shared, is how can we actually do this? If anybody wants to share a thought in that regard, and I mean the broader partnership, if anybody has a point they want to raise in that regard, please let's see your hand, and we'll give you the platform to share.
Just to say, Kwesi, we've also got another question about contacting us about future cooperation. So it might be worth Melissa kind of chiming in about perhaps the mirror board again and how interested parties can involve themselves moving forward.
Okay, I see a hand. I see a hand from Hanjok Lutzia. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Kwesi. Just a few thoughts. I mean, in Horizon 2020, we introduced the multi-actor approach, and I mentioned it in my brief introduction. It is a challenge to bring the different worlds of scientists, farmers, advisors, companies together in one consortium, in one project partnership, and actually working on the flow of co-design of the project, co-thinking of how to use the results, how to scale them up, how to integrate them in the various knowledge systems. So the multi-actor approach is a challenge, but it was quite successful. Looking from Horizon 2020 to the new Horizon Europe, it will continue to be broadly rolled out, this multi-actor approach. And some projects are quite successful in including advisors. I mean, you could also think of GFRAS, this global initiative of advisors, agricultural advisors. So linking up to such networks where advisors, intermediaries between the different worlds of, let's say, science and farmers and other food system actors, certainly a challenge to continue. But there are examples of projects which actually build these bridges with a multi-actor approach. And I agree, NGOs and civil society organizations could play an important role in translating public goods, which are coming out of a project, improving nutrition, improving access to food and water. They could also play a role in such a multi-actor scenario. And I'm wondering a bit, in the past, PEPART, for example, played a good role in having trainings, workshops, seminars, making different actors aware of opportunities in research funding, whether such mechanisms could be revitalized. Actually, in Europe, we leave it up to the member states to organize their support system, national contact points, to link up to the communities, to be, let's say, effective in writing proposals. There should be further thoughts on how across continents to improve such knowledge and maybe make training seminars accessible. Back to you, Kwesi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing those thoughts. The multi-actor approach is very similar to what I mentioned about, the innovation platform, which brings together all these, multi-actor. And as I indicated, it needs focus and it needs investment and it needs to be part of the planning. So that's good to know that it has been applied in this particular case. And also you mentioned GFRAS, which is also an organization that really brings together this last mile organizations that are also particularly involved in development initiatives. So I think moving forward, those are some of the specific questions we have to build when we talk about new initiatives that we are coming in. How do we actually get this link with these intermediation organizations and groups? I see a hand up. Khalif Abe, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think I will be sharing a small brief on the network and partnership, which for us in Kenya, we started and we are seeing that it's yielding fruit. Bringing the private sector, the research organization, and also the government institutions together. So under agriculture sector network. And then right now, the same network has now broadened to the level of now East Africa. And it's yielding fruit. The only problem is the organization silo working methodologies, which is affecting the whole research innovation, because most of the research is not a demand-driven research method that they are supposed to do. So one key issue that the universities and also the research organization has been challenging is to bring out the innovation to the private sector to scale and upscale also. And one key lesson that we have learned is about the policy, which is hampering the private sector to play in the agriculture value chain in particular. And right now, we under the ASNET, which is Agriculture Sector Network in Kenya, which is bringing all this together, it has been formed now that in a weekly, in a monthly, and or in quarterly form, that we are reporting to the government in a round table discussion with all these sectors together. So with that, I think the lesson is about now moving ourselves from the silos, thinking of food security and nutrition as a whole sum to all value stakeholders within the system. So with that, I think it's just a small lesson that I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Khalif. That's very, very useful. And we'll take note of that particular experience. We'll have one final hand up. Marta, please, can you take the floor?
Yes, thank you. I only wanted to mention that it is true that a lot of knowledge exists, but it's not really uptaken for those who can really make use of it. So I think one key priority should analyze what are the obstacles for this uptake of knowledge. And also we have to make more visible the knowledge available. We have to, let's say, connect with those potential entrepreneurs that can move this knowledge into concrete, useful application for our people. So this is something that we really have to work on. And in this sustainable platform, this is why I mentioned also potential business angels or business blending instrument, financial instruments. So when one entrepreneur has an idea, it can also have access to the needed startup financing to bring this to commercial application. And also when they say about multi-stakeholders, we have to think that farmers are their businesses. So that if they want to move to new innovative ways, they have to make sure that we'll have a reward of this movement, let's say. So I also think these socioeconomic studies are also important in order to favorize the uptake of the existing knowledge. So my proposal is that we should work on bringing together more visible what is available of knowledge and train and make capacity of those potential entrepreneurs to move this and provide them with the ecosystem, which is the financial instrument to move on to this. So let's to create this what is called innovation ecosystem in food, nutrition, security, and sustainable agriculture. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. I like the innovation ecosystem and your point about what are the obstacles for uptake. And I think that is really important, because otherwise we can keep producing all kinds of research results, and if the uptake is not very strong, we don't achieve the impact that we have. So that's a very, very good point. But also a point you made, Marta, which triggered my thinking, is the basic question: how do we even project the kind of outcomes, research outcomes that we have, whether they be in the form of technologies or policies, the platform that enables people to go in there to the market and figure out this is the sort of technologies or policy scenarios that are coming out of this initiative. So we need to make it a bit user-friendly and a bit easier for people to get into, so that we can enhance the uptake of these various elements. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move to the final presentation of findings. And here I'll call on Tim. Tim, please take it over.
Thanks, Gracie. I'll hopefully just share my screen now. I hope you can all see this.
Yes.
So yeah, as Gracie mentioned, this last presentation will be discussing how our learnings from the baseline study on the progress and efficacy of the FNSSA Partnership showcase some features and also some key lessons learned around the principle of sustainability and adaptability. So we found that the partnership has actively supported the development of human and organizational capacities, research results, and research and innovation partnerships. So these features support the long-term approach of the platform and partnership, specifically through developing capacities and understanding of multidisciplinary research and innovation that support sustainable project and research outcomes. We've also found that capacity for multidisciplinary working has been developed and enhanced through working in mixed teams in partnership projects. This is for both European and African partners. We also found that projects under the partnership umbrella assigned high importance to strengthening capacity across their project partners. And they did this through identifying and addressing capacity gaps among scientific and technical staff, and specifically building independent African capacity. So building upon this capacity development within the FNSSA partnership, there's been a significant emphasis on the training of staff and students and on knowledge exchange activities. Within our baseline study, we found that 120 PhD students have been supported across all 4 pillars of the roadmap, as well as 101 postdoctoral students. We've also seen that 616 experts participated in knowledge exchange activities, which obviously further strengthens the multidisciplinary approach of the partnership and builds sustainable and adaptive research capacities within project teams. We found that partnership projects have leveraged previously built research and partnership capacities for their ongoing projects. In some cases, research partnerships created the opportunity to follow up research questions and build on strategies identified in previous projects. So I've just spoken about how the partnership has supported the development of capacities. I'll now move on to the sustainable and adaptive approaches of the partnership and its projects. So we also see that sustainable research and uptake approaches have been widely adopted within the partnership. These approaches include multi-stakeholder platforms, multidisciplinary and participatory approaches, systems and value chain approaches, and also the inclusion of target groups. Most of the case study projects in our baseline study had developed approaches that encourage broader multi-stakeholder participation in innovation processes, which can support sustainable and adaptive approaches of the overall partnership. We found that also projects are proactively recommending solutions to policymakers. However, many projects had to postpone outreach to policymakers due to COVID-related disruptions, or because they felt they were still at too early a stage to make recommendations. According to our quantitative analysis, novel and exploitable research products relevant to FNSSA were generated across the 4 pillars of the roadmap. We found that sustainable intensification projects led by African organizations reported the most novel and exploitable research projects. So we've also got a series of lessons learned that we think we can take forward to improve the sustainability and adaptability of the platform. And in my next 2 slides, I'll go through these. So we found that expertise within projects and FNSSA constituent programs, as well as other actors, need support to inform both policy and pragmatic decision making. The importance of continuing knowledge exchange between Europe and Africa at the government and other decision making levels has been highlighted by projects in our baseline study as a supportive action. And projects have identified that they need to have support to have input into policy development where appropriate as well. We found that almost all projects had either gender or governance policies, or were at least working with a specific focus on both, which is obviously a positive. However, we think more can be done throughout the partnership to ensure that strategies surrounding these 2 are put in place by projects to build on partnership sustainability features. We kind of think that perhaps need to have a more top-down approach throughout the partnership. We found that there's evidence that partnership projects build on successes. This is really evidenced by project networks being in place for a project and then shifting over to a more developed project throughout project cycles. And they build on their successes through effective data collection and lesson learning within their projects. However, we need to ensure that these lessons learned within partnership projects are utilized at a program and partnership level. The lessons are learned are shared between and within actors. So for this, we need investments in the coordination of data collection. And also we need to perhaps have a mechanism for partnership actors to share their knowledge efficiently with each other. However, projects are subject to numerous accountability mechanisms, which include audit requirements, reports to national agencies, annual assessment to project leaders, and the program reporting cycle. As a result of this, monitoring of the FNSSA partnership and the future platform need to be responsive and adapted to FNSSA actors' reporting needs. One issue we have faced with the baseline study is reporting fatigue from projects, and perhaps there's a lack of coordination about the different actors conducting monitoring activities on the partnership projects. This concludes my presentation. So Kwesi, back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. That's the sustainability and the adaptability element of the lessons that were learned. And I think this is important because the initiative is not for short-term project result. It's really about how do we make this thing sustainable over the long term. So I think you've given us some information that the improved capacities and improved understandings. There was quite a lot of evidence that the projects were contributing in that regard. You also mentioned the fact that trainings of staff, of students, etc., were there. Probably we also have to ask if some of these trainings can be focused on the development partners and trainings that could be focused on farmer groups to be able to feel able to use the sort of technologies coming out of this work. So I think those are things that we need to look at. And my final comment before I open it up, you talked about some of the lessons learned that you felt were very important. And you mentioned the need for strategies that we could use to track knowledge sharing within our group, the knowledge sharing between the groups, and some mechanisms to make sure that this, some of these key products coming out of our work are contributing to policy formulation, to have clearer evidence that this is happening. I think those are elements, because if we don't succeed in building to the government infrastructure, sustainability becomes a challenging dream that is difficult to attain. So with that, I'm sorry, Tim, you are the same person monitoring, helping me with the, so you probably haven't had time to go through the chat box to see if there's any. But whilst Tim does that, let me say, if anybody wants to make a point on this critical issue of how do we enhance the sustainability and the adaptability of our work over the long term, what are some of the thoughts that can be shared? If you want to make a contribution on that, please raise your hand.
Kwesi, there was a question in the chat that was directed at Martha, and Martha has answered, but I think it didn't go to all the panelists. Maybe she just added it now, but I don't know, Martha, if you want to intervene and also say what you wrote just there.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I was only addressing the panelists. So the question was if we plan to include in this platform those startups and entrepreneurs, and in particular the youth, the young people. And I said, of course, I mean, they are the future, no? So I think, yes, of course, and this is why we should work on the creation of this innovation ecosystem to attract them, so they can not only develop their ideas, but also to grow, to give them the visibility to grow bigger and to create businesses and wealth in both regions. So of course, these are part of our aim to target them and to help them. Thank you, Melissa. I'm sorry for this. I already copy and paste so everybody can see it.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Yeah, definitely, that's a very important element, making sure that the youth are actively involved in this. And that's another very difficult thing, because sometimes we talk about it, but if we don't have a very specific mechanism to enable them to take responsibility and give them something, to really do, it becomes difficult. So I think in moving forward, that's one of the points that we should take from this meeting, to see how exactly we can do that. Okay, now we're going to get into our Mentimeter exercises. Please, assuming that you have all been able to log onto the Mentimeter. So the first question that we are going to address is, what mechanisms can be used to motivate private sector actors to take part in user-led R&I projects? we heard from the earlier discussion that private sector has not been very, very active, or we have not succeeded in making this whole partnership attractive to the private sector. So in moving forward, what are your thoughts? Please take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and put in something in this Mentimeter framework. We will harvest all the ideas, and we may be able to see some outcome out of that on the screen. But we will definitely make sure that every idea that is given will be analyzed. So I really encourage you to share your thought. What can we do to strengthen private sector engagement in this partnership, FNSSA partnership? More and more ideas are coming up, which is very good. So we leave a few more, 1 minute to wrap up on this one. Okay, so we have quite a number of ideas put in there. Some of them, like having a multi-actor approach, which we have heard about. We have some understanding the interests of the private sector. You know, sometimes we assume we know the problem, but they also have their challenges. So basically, understanding their interests and also involve them initially in the process. If we are developing this initiative, it shouldn't just be research institutions and the universities. We already have to be able to find private sector groupings that can be part of this. We have ownership of the process. Some talk here about new business opportunities. So we have to explore new business opportunities, something that is of real interest to the private sector. I mean, we've got to know private sector is in this whole business for making money. They want to make money, whether we like it or not. I mean, and if we want to do massive outscaling, their involvement is crucial. So we need to find, I see some things about engagement, which is very good, new market ideas, knowledge uptake, co-create with them. So that point has been made a number of times, co-create with them. In other words, involve them from the very beginning. And we need to have a language on return on investment. So we're not just expecting them to come and participate in meetings. You know, the long-term view, they have to say, what's in it for them? So that's a very important element. And then we also challenge to have viable products that would be of interest to the private sector. Somebody has also put in profit. You need to indicate the profit potential of some of the initiatives. But I think putting it all together in the center is this multi-actor approach, but also emphasizing the engagement with the private sector. And it will be interesting if some of our future initiatives are actually led by private sector, you know, that we can involve some private sector groups so that they can then bring their own platform of private sector, you know, people to engage in all the other initiatives that we are running. So, yeah, this is very good, very good. We have a second question that we are going to address. So this first question has yielded a lot of good thoughts, and we will analyze them further. But we'd like to move on. Tineka, if you can, okay, we have the second question that we have to address. It says, how can we ensure that R&I projects are not just delivering research outcomes and research results, but also result in developmental impact at scale? Now, this is related to the discussion I raised a short while ago after Florence's talk, that how can we make sure that our partnership is not seen as just an academic exercise, but that we are able to contribute to changing scenarios on the ground. In other words, contribute to transformation of agriculture in our countries. So please share your thoughts on that. We have another 2-3 minutes for you to do that. We already have a number. Thank you very much, everyone who has provided, and please continue to share your thought. How can we make our products such that they result in developmental impact at scale? Then it says, do not let research and universities do the outscaling. That's a very important point. It recognizes that there are groups that are particularly good at this outscaling. It's not, and that's why I was a bit surprised that irrespective of the fact that we have 65% of our funding going to research and universities, our development context is also said to be high. So that's something that we will need to basically look at. And then it says networking many adapted local solutions. Another one says, have a follow-up project in place, which will target more at the development end of the spectrum. Involving local stakeholders and responding to local challenges. So that's also making a very strong point. And by demonstrating tangible results and fulfilling unmet needs, which may lead to actual business opportunities. And then we have making funds available for scaling these technologies to these projects. This is very important. You know, we have to create space for these things to happen. So if we have a project that is really targeted at agricultural transformation, and we have development partners leading it, private sector engagement, etc. And then there's one in the middle which says main issue is cooperating with enterprise, by which we can focus on practice and science. And then the final one I see here is involve relevant research question. Involvement of those who should benefit, some real big benefit for them, long-term engagements, good dissemination channels, etc. So obviously there is the important point of engaging the different sectors that are particularly involved in these types of operations, the development end of our work. Food system solutions are local, and networks are essential to be able to do that. I see more coming in, engagement of customers, that is small and medium scale enterprises that potentially may adapt and upscale results for daily practice. Lots of very, very useful information. I really want to thank all of you very much. Every aspect of this will be analyzed, and when you get the report of this session, you will see that we have not left any point behind. We've analyzed them and synthesized them to the degree possible. Well, ladies and gentlemen, because of time, we will need to move on now, and we are now getting to the point of getting into okay, before I do that, Tim, let me just give you 1 minute to quickly give us any highlight item from the chat box. And I see that Hans-Jörg also has his hand up, but Tim, you go first.
Thanks, Kwesi. So I think we've had some interesting interchange about the impact of funding timeframes that are set upon by donors and do not necessarily match the needs of beneficiaries or projects in some ways. Be interested to see if Hans-Jörg or anyone else has any comments on how potentially funding timeframes can be more flexible in the future, perhaps to marry up with research outcomes that are a bit more longer term, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Maybe first on this question, timeframes are set by proposers. So if proposal writers are actually factoring in maybe in the last year, rather networking and working or giving, let's say, more activity to the partners who are specialists in bringing results to the market, to beneficiaries, also public goods delivering. So if the last 1.5 years are dedicated to such activities, while the research partners more or less reduce their activity, then it's actually in the hand of project writers to do the right planning, actually. Not that research results are still created until the last day, but rather have been created 1.5 years before, so that the last year is actually dedicated for those actors bringing results to beneficiaries. I just wanted to make another comment. 2 years ago, there was an EU-AU ministerial meeting of agricultural ministers, and a very nice initiative was presented called Lady Agri, which is actually a network of women entrepreneurs in food businesses. So it's a network of many women who have small, larger businesses in food. And the idea of this presentation was to raise awareness. But again, I mean, we are depending that such initiatives are actually taken up by those writing proposals. And therefore, yeah, it's in all your hands, actually, if you respond to calls for proposals to put such actors in the forefront. Back to you.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point, Hans-Jörg. But we can also make sure that as the calls are coming in, there are certain requirements. And if we can build some of these things into the calls so that it makes it more of an obligation for us to really make sure we are looking for these type of opportunities and partners. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had an excellent session in this so far. So we've got to the point where we now bring everything together. And I'd like to call on 3 people to very briefly share their own thoughts as part of our conclusion points. First will be Hambani Masheleni, and then will be Hans-Jörg Lutzea, and then Marta Iglesias. So Hambani, can you, Mash, can you start, please?
Kwesi, if I'm not mistaken, Mash had to leave.
Okay. Okay. So probably then we'll start with Hans-Jörg, and then we'll go to Marta.
Yeah, thank you, all of you. I think it was really a very interesting session and very lively debates in the chat, and many pertinent questions actually came up in the chat. So I think also many elements for us to follow up. And it was also great actually to get the monitoring and evaluation exercise highlighted in several bits of presentations, so that yeah, we can further reflect on the results. We can build a consistent view on all the various projects into, let's say, a concise partnership approach. I think also it was mentioned that reaching out to a broader community beyond research organizations and universities, we had a lot of discussion on private sector involvement, but also intermediaries like advisors, like civil society organizations. And there are opportunities, and yeah, the next call for research proposals will give you all who are thinking of writing proposals now, I think, quite some food for thought, how to include those actors like private sector, CSOs. And you will see in the calls, once they are published, we also thought of encouraging you to build in work packages, which could play a role like innovation accelerators, so that ideas which are actually produced along the life cycle of a project are not lost because they haven't been assigned to a work package initially, but that there could be additional funding made available. I would like to stop at here and pass on to Marta.
Okay, many thanks, Hans-Jörg. So I took some notes of key issues that we discussed today. In one of the things is this problem, or let's say issue, with intellectual property rights. I think this is something to be rather addressed early, so we can attract entrepreneurs, so they won't be having, let's say, fear that their knowledge or their know-how is going to be stalled. Red tape, I mean, these administrative issues to make them work, this should be also looked at to make them easy, the participation, if we want to reach out for them, because normally businesses, they have very little time for this sort of administrative arrangements. Another thing that was said is this multi-stakeholder approach. This is proved to be working. We should keep on with this. The gender issues, we should reach out also for entrepreneurs, females, and bring them on board, but with an active role. I also have for research impact, we should look into the obstacles of the uptake of knowledge. We should address them clearly, and to make resources available to make these research results to go into practical solutions for the people. And just finally, in the last criteria we have discussed is to support capacities for and connect with different partnerships and networks to bring, let's say, the knowledge generated and let's say as a higher level to local solutions. So for that, we really to connect to the network to have an impact at a local level and to have some policy support to drive this research into something very concrete that could benefit the people as in general. So they will gain credibility of the actions and they will see the benefit to be part of the platform. So from my side, this is all. I really thank you for all the input that you have said, all the suggested ideas. I think they're very interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marta. And we have benefited from your closing thoughts, Hans-Jörg and Marta. So we are now at the point of doing the very final poll. Sinek, can we have the poll? And so this one says, how comfortable would you be to explain what this EU-AU FNSSA partnership and its transitioning into a platform is all about? So if somebody were to ask you tomorrow, hey, I hear about this partnership which is getting into a platform, EU-AU, what is it? I mean, how comfortable will you be in giving him or her some detailed explanation and even pointing them to instruments and sources of information that they can use? So let's address that question now in the next 1 minute. In the next 1 minute. So our first thought is about being extremely comfortable, somewhat comfortable. We have adequately comfortable. And then the fourth segment says not comfortable. I still do not know what this is all about. So all that is there. Yeah, we're still getting a few more seconds for us to wow, this is beautiful. It's kind of like a stepwise thing. So we have a few people who are not comfortable and there's still a lot that they learn. And that's fine. I mean, one meeting doesn't give all the information, but hopefully the links that have been provided will help us all to build upon that. But I think the most exciting thing is the adequately comfortable group and also the somewhat comfortable group. If we compare this to what it was from the beginning, we see that this workshop or this session has been pretty successful. And I believe since we have all your emails, you will be getting the report of this session. And in that report, we will have links that will lead you to more materials that you can use to build upon that. So we are coming to the end. Our time is actually gone. So I want to just basically thank all the key people who have been behind it. Let me say that the session organizers have been Melissa Plath of University of Helsinki, and that's Melissa waving there. Jenny van der Meen of Wageningen University and Research. And then we have Tim Fry of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. So these three have been the brain behind this session. They've put a lot of work into it. Let me also say that the smooth Mentimeter operation that we have enjoyed has been made possible through Tineke, who is also with the Wageningen University, and together with Jenny, and we really want to thank all of you. Finally, participants, we wouldn't have had a good session without all of you. At one point, there were about 73 participants, and I think as at now, we still have about 50. So you are the great survivors, and what I want you to do, please show your video for now, because we want to, if you show your video and then show your video, and then on the top right-hand corner, you see the view button, hit the gallery, have your full.
Kwesi, it's because this is a webinar, so unfortunately the attendees can't turn on their videos. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, at least I'll get the panelists. Okay, indeed. So panelists, please, let's get your, so that Tim and I would take a shot. I'm trying to make my, give me a second. Okay,
yeah, quite. I've done it from my end.
Okay, but then you have to take multiple shots. I don't think we are all covered in one. Excellent. So thank you all very much, and you continue to, don't forget that the Stakeholder Week still runs until Friday. Very exciting sessions on there. So please register and be an active participant as we strengthen the partnership between Europe and Africa in relation to food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture. Thank you all very much. And
thank you. And Kwesi, just to add that the report won't be coming by email, but you will find information on our Miro board and then on the Leap for FNSSA website, so we don't harass you all with emails. So that's where you can find the information.
Excellent.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.